Hello beautiful people, my name is Vendi and today I'm going to be telling you all of the things that I read in the month of August. This feels weird, being back in front of a camera and filming after not doing so for months, literally consistently, feels really weird, but I'm glad to be back. I'm not gonna let any of the setbacks from the past hold me back now, and I'm just gonna move forward. We're gonna forget about May, June, July. Did I read books? Who even knows? I mean, Goodreads does, and if you're interested in figuring out what I read, you can definitely go over there and check it out, but as far as I know, it's tabula rasa, clean slate. We're just gonna get into the August reads and move on from there. Before we do that though, I wanna just say two things real quick. The first is a disclaimer. My editing software I only really had while I was still enrolled at the school that I was at, so I am back to using Windows Movie Maker. What this means is that I can't edit in the cover of a book next to my face while I'm talking about it, and since I read a lot of ebooks and audiobooks this month from my library, it's gonna be a lot of me holding up a book that's maybe similar or not holding up a book at all, and I hope that's okay with you guys. And the second thing is just thank you to everyone who stuck around and everyone who's left me lovely comments on my old videos and talked to me on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. Just thank you for sticking around and making me feel welcome still in the bookish community while I was away. It's meant a lot, and it's definitely the reason that I decided to come back. So just all of you mean so much more to me than I can ever explain. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right though, enough sappiness. Let's get into the things I've read. The month of August was a pretty solid month. I read a total of 13 books, which isn't my maximum, but it's far from my minimum. I will say that the books that I read were not the ones that I was planning to read because August was the month of the Newt's Readathon, and I kind of failed that just a little bit, but it's okay because I'm still happy with the things I read. The first book that I finished in the month of August was City of Lost Souls by Cassandra Clare, and later in the month I also read City of Heavenly Fire, obviously also by Cassandra Clare. Those are the last two books of Cassandra Clare's Mortal Instruments series, starting with A City of Bones, and as of finishing them, I finished my catch-up / reread of the Cassandra Clare / Shadowhunter books that I've read previously. There's not much that I can say about either City of Lost Souls or Heavenly Fire that isn't a huge spoiler because they are the final two books of the Mortal Instruments saga of the Shadowhunter Chronicles. Basically, that is a series that follows a girl named Clary Frey who thinks that she's a normal human, but it turns out that she is actually a part of this race of beings known as Shadowhunters that defend the mortal realm from demons attacking from other dimensions. So as far as things I liked about both of the final books, I really enjoyed the crafting of Cassandra Clare's world a lot more than I did the first time I read through them. As a character-driven reader, I'm normally drawn to character relationships when I read books, but this time around, I really let myself focus on the Shadowhunter world and the groundwork Cassandra Clare seems to be laying for a massive social change in the Shadowhunter world. As far as things I didn't like, I think that City of Lost Souls started a little slow, and while I did enjoy that more than I did when I first read the books in like late middle school, early high school, I still thought that maybe there was a little bit of excess prose, shall we say, because those books, they're pretty thick. Cassandra Clare is a writing machine. She writes a lot, but I think that City of Lost Souls at the very least could have gone through a little bit more of an edit, shall we say. And as far as City of Heavenly Fire, I liked the bits where the characters from the Dark Artifices were introduced. However, I'm always a little iffy when an author plugs a future series that's like a spin-off in a current one. I'm reading the Mortal Instruments for Clary, Jace, Izzy, Simon, Alec, etc. I don't want to know about Jules or Emma yet. I think it's best if authors trust that their readers will be loyal to their stories and continue reading the spin-offs of the series basically for their own merit rather than because they've been sort of plugged into previous works. That said, I enjoyed both books. I ended up giving both City of Lost Souls and City of Heavenly Fire a rating of 4.5 stars. After that, I ended up reading Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. That is the second book in her Monsters of Verity duology, and yes, I know this isn't it. This is just another V.E. Schwab book that I haven't read, much like The Bane Chronicles is another Cassie Clare book that I haven't read. I guess I'm just going to be holding up TBR books by the same authors who wrote the ones that I did read in August. It's fine. It makes sense, I guess. So as I said, Our Dark Duet is the sequel and conclusion to This Savage Song, which is a story that follows Kate Harker, the daughter of a mob boss who essentially rules the city of Verity, and August Flynn, who is a monster who was created / born of violence in a world where that's how monsters are created. They are made into these tangible, living, almost humanoid creatures when human beings cause unspeakable acts of violence and then they cause trouble for these people. What I really like about this story as a whole and our Dark Duet specifically is that the crux of it seems to be figuring out what it is that actually makes us human. I would argue that in this Savage Song, Kate is more monstrous than August, and August is more human than Kate. But what I like about our Dark Duet is that it sort of flips this dynamic. We get to see Kate at her most vulnerable, at her most human, and August kind of comes to term with his monstrous side and lets himself be who he was born to be. That would be, I think, what I like about the story. Now, as far as things I didn't like, it's entirely my fault for going into a book with preconceived expectations about what it would be like, but the trajectory of the story as it continued into our Dark Duet was very different than what I thought it would be after finishing this Savage Song. And I think having that expectation of how the story would go and thinking that maybe some things would end a little differently ultimately ruined the experience for me just a little bit. I still enjoyed our Dark Duet. I gave it a full 4 stars. It's quite a good conclusion to the series, but it's not what I expected, and that's entirely my fault. Moral of the story is don't go into books expecting anything. After that, I ended up listening to The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and guys, audiobook is definitely the way to go for this story. The Poet X follows a Catholic Latinx girl named Xiomara whose mother is a little bit of a Bible thumper and has very preconceived ideas about what a woman ought to be, and Xiomara doesn't fall into any of the categories that her mom thinks are okay. With her home life so stifled, Xiomara turns to writing as an escape and an allowance for an exploration of her thoughts that she can't really speak otherwise without being ridiculed at best and shamed and sometimes physically hurt at worst. As far as things I liked about the story, I think that, well, everything, honestly. I read it on audio, and Elizabeth Acevedo herself narrates the book, which I think is the perfect way to do it. The Poet X is told entirely in verse, so it's just a bunch of spoken word poems, and I think that as Elizabeth Acevedo is the one who wrote them, is the one who knows Xiomara's character best, her voice is best suited to give those poems a voice, if that makes sense. As far as things I didn't like, I think the ending of the story felt a little bit rushed, and the acceptance that Xiomara's mother seems to have of her towards the end felt a little bit unrealistic considering everything about her character up until that point was sort of against Xiomara as a whole. However, I do like that the story ended on a happy note. So despite my mixed feelings, I ended up giving The Poet X a 4 out of 5 stars. It's a wonderful book, and I super recommend that you listen to it rather than read it on hard copy. Following that, I read Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, and Kingdom of Ash, the final 3 books in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. Boy, how do I even discuss this series? So much changes from book 1, Throne of Glass. I wouldn't even start with Throne of Glass. I'm not sure that it gives you the right idea going into the books, and it certainly made me not want to continue the series. So what I would recommend is starting with The Assassin's Blade, which is a novella bind-up following assassin Selena Serdothian as she realizes that the people that she surrounded herself with in this underground network of people in the Kingdom of Arderlan are perhaps not morally aligned with the same things that she wants. In The Assassin's Blade, Selena tries to basically eradicate the practice of slavery, and it does not go all that well for her, but it does provide the groundwork that starts Throne of Glass. I'm not even sure how to talk about my feelings about the series. How do I put this? Okay, so things I liked about the last 3 books. I think that the characterization of the main 3 that we meet in Throne of Glass is brought to its peak. Everyone is hit with a lot of crap, and they rise above it with the help of their friends, and they struggle through it, but ultimately they come out on top. And ultimately, it's a very feel-good, happy story where good defeats evil, and you know that I'm a sucker for that. Also, I really enjoy how much closer the books get to actual high fantasy than romantic pseudo-fantasy as the series goes on. There's still a hell of a lot of romance, but ultimately it is a fantasy story by the time we get to the last couple books. As far as things that I didn't like. So for me, a book is ideal when the stakes for whatever the conflict is are relatively high. I love some forbidden romance. I love some fights to the death. But what I like more than stakes is a sense of consequences. In these books, the stakes seemed high, but the consequences were low. And that didn't jive for me. I'll be doing a full series review when I've reread these books, and I am planning on doing a reread later in the year / early next year with Noria yet again. And then I'm going to have gathered my thoughts perhaps a little bit better and discuss it in full for you guys. But overall, I've become Sarah J. Maas trash. Like, it's on par with Cassandra Clare. I enjoy it. I ended up giving Empire, Tower, and Kingdom in order a 4.5, a 4, and a 3.75 stars. After that, I ended up reading The Surface Breaks by Louise O'Neill, which is a book that you may remember from my Newts TBR. It's one of the few I got to. The essential gist of The Surface Breaks is that it is a feminist retelling of the story of The Little Mermaid. The mermaid called Morrigan lives in the undersea, which is a misogynist place to live. She and her sisters are touted as her father, the Sea King's property, essentially, and it's known that they are valued predominantly for their beauty. As Morgan is considered the most beautiful, she has been promised by her father to marry his most high-ranking general, a man old enough to be her grandfather. But all Morgan really wants to do is escape, go to the surface, and find out what happened to her mother who disappeared up there. As far as things I liked the concept of this book. I personally believe that The Little Mermaid was a relatively feminist story in its original take, even the Disney version. The idea of a woman making a choice for herself to do what she wants despite the wishes of somebody who has power over her, to me, is a powerful thing, taking agency like that. Losing her voice, a little iffy. Having the man fall in love with her specifically because of her physical beauty, also kind of iffy for me, which is why I like the original story where it doesn't work. The moral of The Little Mermaid for me seemed to be, if somebody can't get to know you through your words and your deeds, they can't truly fall in love with you. And it's naive to think otherwise. So to me, that's an ultimately feminist message, despite the relatively sad ending of the original tale. However, as far as things I didn't like, I think the feminism was heavy-handed at best and actually misandrist at worst. We live in a patriarchal society. We live in a misogynist society. There's no denying that. However, within our society, there are good eggs. It's not that every single man is literally the worst, and it's not that every single man literally is causing the problem. Wow, hashtag not all men. Wow, great job, Bendy. Loving that for me. In this story, if you were a man, you were either complicit in the objectification and harassment and assault occasionally of women, or you were the one actually perpetrating it, which, yikes. Also, horrible levels of girl hate, the internalized misogyny. At the very end, it was sort of challenged, but I would have liked to see Morgan come to those conclusions as time went on, instead of being like, I hate women, I hate women, I hate women at the very end, and like the last 10 pages be like, empowerment, you know? Because that's not how anything works. I don't know. I'm disappointed mostly in this book because I feel like it could have been really great. Overall, it was a pretty run-of-the-mill book for me. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars, and I'm excited to read more by Louise O'Neill. I think that she'll do better when she gets to craft a story entirely from the ground up rather than sort of being constricted to an already existing storyline the way fairy tale retellings do. I have faith in her. That was heavy. After that, I read a really light, fluffy, wonderful book, The Summer of Jordi Perez by Amy Spalding, which was gifted to me by my dear friend Kevin from the channel Storyglyph for my birthday this past oh wow. Nope, 3 months ago now. Jesus. The Summer of Jordi Perez follows Abby, a plus-sized fashion blogger. When Abby lands an internship working at a small boutique that she really loves because it has really cute clothing for plus-sized women at it, and meets the other intern, Jordi, sparks fly, things are great. I mean, what can I even say about this story that I don't want to say anymore because it will spoil it, but I definitely want you to read it, so I don't want to spoil it. As far as things I like, for one thing, it's not a weight loss narrative. Abby is fat at the start, she's fat at the end, and she's happy over the arc of the story. 2, Abby is gay. She knows she's gay from the very start. She has a relationship that starts off as a really wonderful, wholesome friendship. Everything about this book just makes me smile. I can't stop, as you guys can definitely see. As far as things I didn't like, I did think that The main conflict of the story, the one that happens towards the end, was resolved a little fast, but it's a short book and it's a rom-com, so that's bound to happen. Can't really complain about it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and thank you so much, Kevin, for sending it to me because it's just brought me so much joy. Okay, home stretch here. The next 2 books that I read were graphic novels called Rapunzel's Revenge and Calamity Jack, written by Shannon Hale. The premise of these stories is that it's the tale of Rapunzel, but actually feminist, and set in a Wild West-like world where Mother Gothel controls the growth of plants and is therefore like a business tycoon. It's wild. You know the story. Rapunzel gets imprisoned in a tower, and then she gets rescued, but not really, because she ends up rescuing herself. And on her way home, where she's decided she's going to give Gothel what for and get her mother and father back to safety, she ends up meeting Jack, an outlaw who climbed a beanstalk and got into some trouble with some giants a little while back and is on the run from them. And the 2 of them get together, partner up, and hijinks ensue. I really like most everything about this story. I read it a long time ago, I think when I was in 7th grade for the first time. Don't know, that sounds about right. And the same things that I liked then, I like now, but with an added dash of nostalgia. Rapunzel is tough as nails, but she's also like such a woman. Like if you want to see the badass girl in a dress trope done right, I would definitely recommend checking out these 2 graphic novels. They're very short, you'll absolutely fly through them. As far as things I didn't like, not much. I mean, I wish there was a 3rd. I wish there was a 4th and a 5th and a 6th. That's about it. Critically, maybe like a 3-star. Cute, fun, wonderful, but like emotionally, they're both 4-star reads for me. So I think that's what I'm gonna go with. After that, I read Grey Sister, which is book 2 in the Book of the Ancestor series by Mark Lawrence. It's the sequel to Red Sister. Red Sister follows Nona Grey, a child who was sold from her village for spoilery reasons to what's essentially like a guild of street fighters. Ends up doing harm to a street fighter who has friends in high places, shall we say, and the only way that she can stay alive and not be killed by those friends in high places is if she goes to a convent to study to become an assassin nun. Obviously, that works because Nona survives up until the events of Grey Sister, where she is still in training to be an assassin nun. So as far as things that I like about Grey Sister that are non-spoilery, I like how Nona's view of the world is changing. She started off in Red Sister as fairly childish, which makes sense considering she was a child, but she had a very limited and narrow worldview, and that was occasionally difficult to get through because you just wanted her to know more and to not trust people as much or not trust the wrong people as much. In Grey Sister, she's learned who her friends are and how to notice and love and care for them. However, she still has this little spark of naivete that kind of carries her through and is one of the things you really like about her and end up rooting for her for. As far as things I didn't like, there were occasionally times when it was clear that some of these women were written by a man, and if you read it, you'll know what I mean, but overall, it didn't really detract from my enjoyment of the story. I mean, considering my rating was a solid 5 out of 5 stars for both Grey Sister and Red Sister, I hope that tells you that they are definitely worth the read and you should definitely pick them up if you are so inclined. The final thing I read in the month of August, or I guess listened to, was Royally Screwed by Emma Chase. It follows Olivia Hammond, a New York City born and bred pie maker whose business is kind of failing and has been since her mother passed away, as she meets Prince Nicholas of a country whose name escapes me. Wesco. The country is named Wesco. And Prince Nicholas has been charged by his grandmother, the Queen, to find himself a wife by the end of the summer. Prince Nicholas is used to a lot more freedom than this, so he decides to spend his summer just partying it up and doing whatever he wants, and he'll do his duty by the end of it, but he won't be happy about it. Until he meets Olivia, and he tries to charm the pants off her literally, and she throws a pie directly at his smug royal face. And romance ensues. As far as things I liked, the story was really sweet. I'm a sucker for romances, and the smut was, you know. I loved Olivia's relationship with her little sister and her father. At no point did the struggles that she lived with feel like tragedy porn that were just there to make her, oh, woe is me, more beautiful and doe-eyed to the romantic lead's eyes. No, she got her shit together and had respect for herself from the very start, and I really appreciate that in a heroine. As far as things I didn't like, I think Nicholas was just on the borderline of like too arrogant and a little too like macho, masculine, protective for me to like really get into it. He got better as the story went on, but it was still a little much for me at the very start. Like a little too alpha. Oof. I just threw up in my mouth a little saying that, I'm sorry. But overall, I really enjoyed the story. I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars, rounding out the month of August in a really wonderful way. And that is it for the things that I read in August. I had a pretty solid month, and September looks like it's going to be just as good, if not better. I'm buddy reading so many things with so many wonderful people. If you like this video and you agree with any of the things I said about any of these books, please leave me a thumbs up. And if you like me and you want to hear more from me about any bookish related things, please subscribe to my channel. I post on weekends and hopefully, not to jinx myself, but I should be posting regularly once a week from now on. Comment down below if you've read any of these books. I would love to chat with you, whether our thoughts are similar or diverge. I'm always down to talk literature with some of my favorite booktube pals. But until next weekend, that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time with a new video. Goodbye.